C.S. Lewis wrote, "You are already too old for fairy tales, but someday you'll be old enough to start reading fairy tales again." Now, this may seem strange to some of us and maybe even paradoxical because many of us think, oh, we seemingly outgrow fairy tales. Like our level of thinking graduates to a level that far surpasses anything a fairy tale could ever offer us. But whether you realize it or not, for 1 month out of every year, our society seemingly universally adopts the biggest fairy tale of them all, the myth of Santa. Now, I'm talking, of course, about the big man in the red suit that we all know and love. Now, chances are Santa played a critical role in all of our celebrations at Christmas as a child. And for some of us with younger brothers and sisters, he probably still does. But the question today is, as adults preparing to start families in the next few years, the question that we all have to ask ourselves and answer at some point down the road is, what do we want our kids to believe about Santa? So my goal today is not to convince you that a belief in Santa is inherently bad, nor is it to persuade you to dissuade your kids from instilling such a belief. But I do feel that there are several aspects of the Santa Claus doctrine, if you will, the beliefs about Santa and our culture that need reconstruction. So what I'm calling for is not a deconstruction of all beliefs about the jolly old elf, but instead a reconstruction, a redirection about what we believe about Santa and how we teach that to our kids, and possibly the implications and the effects of this in our society. As Christians specifically, we have a duty to instill more beliefs and ideals about Christmas and about Santa to our kids, such beliefs that point our children to Jesus, not detract from him. And so the first of the points that I feel like are critical, that critically detract our kids from the true meaning of Christmas, is that the sheer immorality of lying to our kids about Santa. You see, most parents will justify to their kids that Santa is real, and they'll justify their lie on the basis that it's beneficial. They'll say that it encourages childlike wonder, it encourages imagination, it allows a kid to be a kid, if you will. But the issue here is not that parents are not satisfied with just that their child has a conception about Santa. They want them to actually believe, right? When I was a kid, I remember specifically believing in Santa, and I would wait every year. And in so many times when I was younger, it was not for the gift of Christ, it was not for the celebration of that, but it was the gifts of Santa and what he was going to bring. See, my parents were not very satisfied with just that I had an idea about Santa. They wanted actual belief. And often parents go to great lengths to carry out this lie, right? They'll fabricate evidence. They'll concoct these lies about what they want their kids to believe about Santa. But on the grounds that it is beneficial for imagination and childlike wonder, that seemingly fails. So you see, dogmatically forcing our children to believe in Santa and what we want them to believe does not encourage imagination. In fact, it stifles it. Dr. David Kyle Johnson, a PhD, he holds a PhD in psychology. He studied largely the effects of Santa Claus and the Santa Claus myth on children. And he points out that imagination involves pretending. And to pretend something, you have to genuinely believe that it doesn't exist. He uses the example that Christians don't imagine that Jesus rose from the dead. They believe it. So in the same way that forcing our kids to believe what we want them to about Santa is the same way as if we force them to believe what we want them to about Jesus. You see, that doesn't encourage a relationship with Jesus. If we force it down our kids' throats, that doesn't encourage a personal relationship. So it's the same way with Santa. If we force it down our kids' throats, then it doesn't encourage their imagination. It doesn't cultivate their wonder. And so, how do we alleviate this? How do we get around this? A study conducted by the American Enterprise Institute found that 84% of adults over the age of 21, this was conducted, found that 84% of adults reported a belief in Santa as a child. Of this, 50% reported that Santa was very important, quote, very important in their Christmas celebration. Only 16% reported that he wasn't important. But from this 84%, a large number, a vast majority, over half, reported that once they realized that Santa was not real, they reported a lot of distrust, a lot of mistrust for their parents, and how this had genuinely affected them for years and years to come. And so I feel like one way that we can get around this is to allow your children's Santa Claus story to be their own. Don't fabricate lies or concoct evidence, but allow them to wonder. Encourage the childlike imagination that can come from that. But don't go to such great lengths that you cover up the truth, and constantly speak truth into that. Secondly, I feel like the performance-based nature of Santa's gift giving is contradictory to the nature of Jesus Christ. It's contradictory to the nature of grace. You see, a consistent theme about Santa is that he's making a list and checking it twice, right? And so Santa's nature is to give to those who are deserving what they want, and to give to those who are undeserving, he gives them coal, right? We're all familiar with that. But on the other hand, Jesus gives to us all. Not because of who we are, not because of what we do, but it's because of who He is. And so, in adopting Santa's policy, this orients our children to be focused on being good enough and getting enough to where they're full instead of giving and doing good until they're empty. And so, this can have a devastating effect on our kids' moral convictions and moral beliefs if they believe that they can only do a certain amount of good things in order to get gifts from Santa. Secondly, the idea that Santa is making a list and checking it twice can have a devastating effect on our theology. In his book, The Cure, John Lynch seeks to outline the problems with Americanized Christianity. And one of these he feels like is what he refers to as the Santa Claus is coming to town theology. Lynch argues that we substitute our ideas about Santa that are performance-based to our ideas about God. And he argues that this will be we believe that we can be just good enough so that God will be pleased. But he also says that this can have devastating effects on how we view God and can affect our children not only up until their young lives, but later on to their views about God or how they choose to view Him. Matthew Warner said it best in his article, "Are You Lying to Your Kids About Santa?" He said this, "The point is that Santa can't just be a guy we get stuff from." He said that Santa should be shown as an emblem, a symbol of the holiday season, but most importantly, a symbol of giving, a symbol of benevolence, and a symbol of moral uprightness and good character. He says that Santa should be seen as a man, and just that, not a deity to be worshipped. And we must realize that the purpose of Santa is not to just get stuff. The purpose of Santa is to teach our children how to give. Because as parents, that's what we're truly after, right? We want to instill beliefs in our kids that where they give and not pursue selfishness. But if we choose to do this and allow as parents to teach about Santa and not make it performance-based, and choose to allow our kids to believe that Santa is good because he's just good, then that can cultivate and point them towards the gospel of Christ. Finally, I think there's always the running risk that our kids will elevate Santa Claus over Jesus Christ, and that's a potential demoralizing effect of the holiday season. But one way I think this can be alleviated is that we choose to focus on the true Santa Claus, the real man and who he was. As Warren points out in his study, St. Nicholas was a bishop that was widely known for giving. He was a man of great character, and he was a saint. Research done by the St. Nicholas Center, the center who is proposing the case for Santa Claus as the man, tells that St. Nicholas played a pivotal role in the Council of Nicaea. If you know the story, there was a man named Arius who was suggesting that Jesus was not in equal standing with God. Well, needless to say, St. Nicholas got pretty mad about this, and he runs across the room and just decks Arius. Well, St. Nick ends up in jail, but he ends up getting bailed out by who else? Jesus himself. So I think in teaching our kids lessons like these, that's what I want to teach my kids about who Santa was and what he should stand for. A man of great character, but a man that ultimately pointed to Christ. So our focus, in conclusion, should not be to use. Our focus should be to use the true story of Santa to point to the true story of Jesus, and to point to the true reason for the season. And as future parents, we're entrusted with the grave task of instilling moral beliefs and ideals in our children. And one of these is what they choose to believe about the captain of Christmas, Santa Claus. So in conclusion, allow your children to believe their story about Santa Claus and make it their own. And finally, use the story of Santa as a teaching moment for the gospel of Christ. And while the story of Santa can be told in a way that's contradictory to Jesus, I believe that if taught rightly, it can be a sense of childlike wonder and excitement. Thank you.